Hey, Discern listeners, it's time to continue watching Jorge and Anfisa. Let's watch.
Okay, now we were a little bit concerned about one couple here, Anfisa and Jorge, because you guys actually missed your flight last night. What happened?
Jorge was broke and he didn't have money, so we could get on the flight, but we wouldn't have money for anything when we arrive here. So we decided to miss the flight and wait till he gets more money. And we took the next flight.
So first off, I've actually gone back a little bit to watch the tell-alls. The Journeys series on Discovery Plus, for whatever reason, excludes the tell-alls, which I guess makes sense because the tell-alls are kind of chaotic and like, where do you cut? Because sometimes they're over-talking each other. But anyway, so I'm going back and watching the regular tell-alls in the regular season, and it's interesting to see Nicole and Azan and little bits of their story as they're at the tell-all, and it's just interesting to see. It's like, oh, so that, because I didn't watch this show when it was first coming out. I only started watching a couple years ago. So we hear that they missed their flight, and according to Anfisa, it was because Jorge was broke. And so she says, we could have afforded the plane ticket, but then we wouldn't have any money once we got here. So we canceled the flight and got the next flight. So the flight they missed was yesterday. So maybe they got another flight later the day or earlier this day. And I'm thinking, how is that going to save you money? I mean, what? I mean, I guess maybe if you had a first class ticket and then you can, I don't know, maybe George's business is more chaotic than I thought. He deals in retail, I believe. And so maybe he was waiting for some sort of money to come in. The way, who knows, but the way that they depict his job on the show anyway, it just seems like there's not a regular source of income. It seems to just be random. And a lot of it depends on his personal relationships with people. So
Jorge, you were flat broke.
Yep. Actually, my bank account was frozen, and I couldn't access it.
It's not my fault, though.
So you didn't drain the bank account?
No, it's like I couldn't access my funds.
Okay, so sometimes that happens. It's not disgraceful or shameful. It's sometimes you run into hard times. However, if you're buying super nice cars that require 2 spots to park, remember that nonsense, and other kinds of things, then maybe you have bad budgeting, which again, people have. And so he's saying that his bank account was frozen.
Really?
Yep.
So you finally got here. We were about to start taping, but you guys hadn't arrived. So was there another fight this morning that caused you to be late today?
Nope, that's all her. I was ready to go right off the bat, and then
You woke up at 7. We were
All right, so we use this as a jumping off point, and in couple therapy, especially in the first few weeks, first few sessions, I will assess exactly what's happening right here. And the markers that I would note is that, it wouldn't be uncommon for clients to show up late to a session, for example. And maybe they're like, well, we were late. I wouldn't ask clients to justify why they were late. I mean, if people are late, they're late. And rarely clients are late. But anyway, so he immediately says, that's her. Now, she threw him under the bus regarding, okay, so just imagine for yourself that you're going to meet up with your family. You're flying to another city to see your family, and your partner's bank account is frozen, and you're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And he works something out and you get another flight. Very stressful. You're probably having a lot of talks between the two of you. But once you meet up with your family, it depends on the culture of the family, the culture of the couple. But in my relationship with my wife, I would hope that my wife wouldn't immediately throw me under the bus, even though it was my fault. I would imagine that my wife would just be like, well, we ran into some issues, but, we got here and everything's fine. And if people wanted more explanation, my wife would probably turn to me and she'd be like, well, this is more kind of Kirk's story, so he can tell it. In other words, she's not lying, but she's not like ready. She's not champing at the bit to throw me under the bus. And whereas she was like, it's him. Now, she wasn't ridiculing him. She was just stating facts, but it shows a perhaps lack of care between the couple, which has been happening from the beginning of this relationship, meaning that you don't think about how it could impact the other person or don't care, or you are going tit for tat, meaning that you are operating from a place of pain yourself because you've been very hurt by your partner. And so the next chance you get to hurt them back, you will. A lot of couples will do this. And if you're ever in a pattern like that, you should note it as not great and also the precursor to the dissolution of the relationship, because there's not a lot of love that can love will diminish over time. It will wither. So think about this for yourself, and maybe you were in a relationship like this in the past, but essentially what happens over time is you're hurt. If we're just thinking about from one person's perspective, your partner hurts your feelings, you try to deal with it, it doesn't get resolved most of the time, they continue to hurt your feelings, you start to build some contempt, some ideas about your partner that they don't care about your feelings, they don't care about your life, they are whatever label you put. Now, it's possible that your partners are psychopathic and that sort of thing, but in all likelihood they're not. They're just triggered themselves and are clouded by their own pain and fears, which is almost all the time the case. But anyway, but from your perspective, you're starting to I don't think my partner even really cares. And I'll say that even if you are aware of the way that patterns develop, it's hard not to fall into that pit of negativity about one's partner. It's just I know that they're triggered, but all signs are pointing towards my partner just does not care about my feelings. If anything, in all likelihood, your partner cares too much about your feelings and is being triggered and has a defensive structure that makes it look like they don't care about your feelings. But anyway, so you start to develop this pain over time and you don't know any way out of it. It's not so bad that you want to leave, but it's not great. And so you're just kind of walking around with this unresolved, ever growing pile of pain that your partner has inflicted on you. And as a way of, you resort to various different things of trying to, resolve that. You've tried to talk with them in your way, maybe it comes out weird or whatever. But eventually what some individuals will do is they will say, well, if I hurt them back, maybe they will learn how it feels to be in my shoes. A lot of people will do this. And on its face, it doesn't sound good, right? And it isn't good. And it almost never works. It can work occasionally if the other person is differentiated or it's well understood what's happening, but it's not a great strategy, obviously. So you're like, okay, so the next chance I get, and sometimes it's an unconscious thing, sometimes it's a conscious thing. So it's possible that for her, she's like, he's hurt my feelings, because we know that to be the case, that she walks around frequently feeling hurt, right? Whether it's real or imagined. Some of it real, I think some of it imagined. And she will, at the first opportunity, throw him under the bus and say, let me offer you up for sacrifice. And maybe through that, because he'll feel how it feels, like, oh, she just threw me on their bus. Maybe this is how she feels when I throw her under the bus, and I will stop doing that. That's not likely to happen. So we see her do that, and then it's the next chance he does that. And then they immediately start to argue. There's a totally different way of dealing with this, right? She could have said the way that I role-played it earlier. She wouldn't be lying, but she wouldn't be throwing him under the bus. Internally, she might be thinking he is a bad budgeter, but if you love and care about your partner, you're not going to try to humiliate them. I mean, what's the point in that? And then for him, the first chance he gets, he says, well, we were late here because of her. And he could have easily said, oh, well, we ran into some issues. We were kind of both scrambling. So now for her, if he said something like that, she could say, well, it was really me, it wasn't him, but wow, that's nice that he would blame himself. Maybe even he says, it was kind of me because I was late to get up or whatever. But, as long as he's not lying, it's not an untruth. And then imagine the goodwill that could happen from that, the building of trust and the pattern of taking care of each other that could develop. So when I see a couple and they act like this, when they sit down, it's a marker of something. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means, well, they're in the right office. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. Let's talk about being a problem solver. Whenever we have a problem in our lives, we go through different stages of change. In the pre-contemplative stage, we're not even ready to acknowledge the problem. When we finally manage to recognize the issue, we enter the contemplative stage. In this stage, we know we have a problem, but we're not ready to take action. We're contemplating what action to take and whether or not to take action at all. For some people, they can remain in the contemplative stage for years, never taking action to improve their life. I'm guessing that some of you are in this stage regarding going to therapy. You've acknowledged that you probably need therapy, but for whatever reason, you haven't taken action yet. Well, as I always say, we all need therapy from time to time, and we all deserve therapy. One way to easily get therapy is through BetterHelp. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and/or even live chat sessions with your therapist. So, when you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/Kirk.
Supposed to be here at 6.
I woke up at 5 and I said it's
You didn't
5.
wake up. What? When?
I woke up at 5. I
went
said
to
it's
sleep at
5.
like 5.
No, I woke up at 5 and I said it's time to get ready. You're like, no, well, we're gonna get ready. They know I'm always late. I'm like, okay.
We weren't sure you were going to make it at all. We were really concerned.
So, more throwing under the bus, that's another marker in couple therapy, actually, is when it wouldn't be uncommon for a couple to arrive late and for one of the individuals to say something like, well, you said that he'll get paid either way. Like the couple, you said that you didn't mind being late because you said that he gets paid either way. Now, for me as a therapist, I'm not. It doesn't insult me. I'm just like, oh, interesting that would happen, and that someone would out someone like that, and actually the reverse of that can be a problem too, because sometimes couples will have pretty elaborate conflicts that will happen outside the office, and because they're so careful to not throw their partner under the bus, I won't get an idea of what happened. They'll both be holding back as they sit on my couch and will present a story that was pretty mild, and I'll get the picture of just like, oh, okay, so you just kind of barely thought about something last night? Is that what happened? And I'll hear the hesitation in their voice, and so sometimes I actually have to do the reverse, where I'll say, I'm getting the idea like you're both holding back, and that's not going to help. So just let it out. So there's different ends of the spectrum.
The problems that Jorge and Anfisa are dealing with. Matt, let me start with you.
It's just life. It's part of being married, being in a relationship. It's perfectly normal.
Yes, and he's, I think, being kind by saying that. I'm guessing that's not, I don't know who this fella is, but I'm guessing that's not his entire thought about watching them fight like that. And so on one level, you'll hear a lot of people say this. Even couple therapists, even myself, will say like, well, it's normal. And I think that on one hand, that's great because it will destigmatize this kind of thing. And most couples think they're the only couple on the block that's fighting like this. And I guarantee you're not. On the flip side, it can be kind of a problem because it normalizes something that it's normal, but it shouldn't become the norm. Anfisa and Jorge could, with a lot of therapy and a lot of work over the span of 5-10 years of individual and couple therapy, they could achieve a relationship style that did not involve 95% of the conflict and the intensity that they exhibit.
Relationships are a difficult thing. They take work,
All right, Ala, let me ask you. What about you? What do you think? Because you're someone who...
No, I'm not surprised they're young. So they just try to argue, make their life more.
I don't try to argue.
You don't think you try to argue?
Nope.
Right. That's another perspective that you'll hear, is that people are addicted to chaos or addicted to conflict. And there are some extremely rare presentations that I would conceptualize that way. But I find that is, for whatever reason, just a cultural conceptualization. It's also blaming the victim to some extent. I don't think either one of them, I really believe this, I don't think either one of them wants to be in conflict. I think they're actually striving for no conflict. I think they're used to conflict. You could say that. You could say like, wow, the two of you seemed, the two of you seem very accustomed. Like in other couples, even coming close to the kinds of ways that you treat each other, they'd be shocked by what's happening in themselves and in their partner. But you just seem to bounce back. You're accustomed to it, and it's become normalized to you. It hasn't become an alarm bell. Now, on the other hand, I think for Anfisa, it's hard to know what's going on with George, but at the very least for Anfisa, her relational traumas are such that she probably on a daily basis is triggered, and so it is normal to her, and I'm guessing she doesn't want to be like that. In all likelihood, Anfisa is very ashamed. Typically when I treat someone like Anfisa, and I don't know if I'm conceptualizing her accurately, of course, because it's a reality TV show and God knows how they're editing this, but usually when I treat the Anfisas of the world, it might take a bit, but it becomes very apparent that they're extremely ashamed of themselves. They feel broken on the inside. They feel empty. You'll often hear those words, broken and empty. Yeah, somehow it's just like, oh, I think you're like addicted to conflict. I think you like the conflict. And that's not usually the case.
I get, like, once I know that I'm not going to be back by the time I said, like, I already know that, like, I'm already getting mentally.
Incidentally, I think that is Pedro and Chantel, correct me if I'm wrong. They're next on the list, I believe. I'm pretty sure once I finish with Jorge and Anfisa, I'm going to watch them. I have received a lot of requests to do that. I've managed to glimpse little scenes here and there, but I know nothing about them. I imagine they fight a lot if people are asking me to watch them, though.
Prepared, ready when I get home, like, before I put the key in the lock, I'm just like.
We also found out that this morning that you guys sent a picture of broken phones to our producer. Yeah, it was crazy. Look at that. Those are your phones, right?
Yep, that happened.
Yeah.
Tell me what made that happen.
We just had a little argument.
Yikes. If you heard all of the, and I've been over this before, but we'll just add that to the list. I don't know, but I'm guessing that Anfisa destroyed his phone, and the fact that they're laughing about it is disturbing. Keying his car, hitting him twice on camera. On camera. Do we think that those are the only times she ever hit him? I'm just going to say probably not. And the screaming and the controlling and all that kind of stuff. Now, I have reviewed like where I think she is on the abusive spectrum. Some people might have a problem with that we would have a spectrum of severity regarding abusive behavior. We should just maybe say, look, if you're abusive, you're abusive. You know, we shouldn't delineate between mild or moderate or severe. But for the sake of a thought experiment, I would say that she is toward the mild to moderate side of things. In terms of the perpetrators that I've treated, there are people who are pretty horrific. Think about the allegations against Jeffrey and Varia. If you've read those allegations, the police reports, they are extensive. The incidents that he was, I think, convicted of, extremely disturbing. Okay, where do we put her? But definitely beyond the threshold. So I think they're going to talk about how she broke his phone.
And you threw the phone. Anfisa, did you throw the phone down?
He was the first. He threw my phone, and I was like, what are you doing?
Uh-huh.
And I threw his phone.
That looks like...
Oh, all right. So I take that back. Bad on me for assuming that it was Anfisa. So he threw her phone. That's interesting. That adds nuance to their conflict and to the abuse. To break someone's phone is absolutely abusive. You're destroying their property. You could be throwing it at them. The thing to always think about, and this is what I learned early in my career, because at first I'm thinking, well, why is it abuse? Because I believe in Washington State, don't quote me on this, it's a crime, I think assault in the 4th degree, if you break an item, an object, in anger. If you're angry at your spouse and you break an object, under a lot of circumstances, it's considered assault, even though you never touched your partner. Because the way it was explained to me, the idea is that I'm going to destroy this, and if you don't stop what you're doing and comply, next it's going to be you that I'm going to break. So when you are breaking someone's items, even if it's your own item, like if you punch the wall, you're really angry at your spouse, you're like, and you punch the wall and you put a hole in the wall, that could be considered abusive and a crime. And I think rightfully so. There are a lot of other ways to deal with one's anger. You could even argue, look, if you have to break something, get away from your spouse so that they don't know you're breaking the thing. Because, you could go into the other room and break something and still have it be an intimidation, or at least intimidating. Best case scenario, you get treatment so that you don't actually break anything, and you have ways of managing your triggers and your emotional regulation, and you heal from whatever triggers that are triggering you.
More than throwing, that looks like putting on the ground, stomping like that.
George threw my phone just once, but he's stronger, and I had to throw it 3 times to get it like that.
Tell us what the argument was about.
I really don't remember.
You came late from work?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so he came late from work, and it's classic, just classic. I don't know, we'll hear what they say, but a classic trigger for couples like this, and I think a classic trigger for them, that I'm guessing due to her relational traumas and their relationship insecurity, she, upon realizing he was late coming home, maybe there was a buildup of abandonment feelings just for him going to work. It's not uncommon for people with certain relational traumas and personality issues, characterological issues, that just you going to work could intellectually be realized by the individual with the issue that it's not an abandonment, but in their heart and in their body, or most of their brain, most of their limbic system interprets it as absolutely an abandonment, and the individual will feel very confused. It's like, why am I so angry at my partner? They just went to work, but my partner, it's the analogy would be, you have a bad dream about a friend or a partner, and you wake up in the morning and you're initially really angry at your partner, but then you're like, oh wait, that was a dream. And the thing to always remind yourself is, you did that to yourself. Oftentimes when we have dream recall, we'll think, well, that was weird, like you were in my dream, as if the individual entered your dream. No, you're the hand behind the puppet in all the elements. You're not just in yourself, but you create all the other characters, including the landscape. If you're being chased by a monster, you're the monster. If a dragon is coming to kill you, you are the hand in the puppet of the dragon. So just because you're identifying as one character in the dream doesn't mean that you are only that person. Anyway, so, and the reason why I point this out is to help with people and their, framing their own dreams, but also it can really create a rich landscape for analysis, because what part of me is actually being represented in the dragon, that kind of thing. It's hard to know exactly, but it's an area in which people can play to figure out themselves and to explore themselves. It's not a science, it's more of meaning making. But anyway, so you wake up in the morning and you're angry at your partner, but you're like, well, no, I shouldn't be angry. But you start to treat your partner badly because you had a dream about them doing something bad to you. So it's along those lines. So people with a lot of relational traumas will say to themselves, well, he just went to work, I shouldn't hate him. But most of you is just like, but why do I am so angry? And then when he doesn't come home on time, and maybe he lied, because he does lie, he's avoiding, and he'll say it's for good reason. You could argue it's kind of for a good reason, but not really. Anyway, so then her hurt builds and builds and builds. Say he says he'd be home at 5:15, she's already at like a 7 out of 10 in terms of her pain, and then a 7 out of 10 in terms of her anger. And she's texting him, where are you? And he doesn't text back. He's thinking, well, I'm on my way home. And she's like, he didn't text me back, and he said he would. And then they get in a huge fight about it. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.